Good morning.
Summer of riots. I mean, it's probably best first to go to listen to what Nigel Farage had to say. Have a look at this.
I don't support street violence. I don't support thuggery in any way at all. What you've seen on the streets of Hartlepool, of London, of Southport is nothing to what could happen over the course of the next few weeks. Let's have proper law and order. But Mr. Starmer, just to blame a few far-right thugs to say that's the root of our problems doesn't work.
Well, Ed Vaizey, is he right?
No, I don't think he's right, and I think Keir Starmer is right, actually, and I think Keir Starmer is right to call this out. I mean, obviously, we've had different kind of incidents which has led to this accusation of two-tier policing, and with any conspiracy theory, there's a kernel of truth. You and I have seen the Palestinian demonstrations, particularly in London, which have made the Jewish community very, very frightened and very concerned that the police are not taking the right action against them. But having said that, what distinguishes the riots that the Prime Minister was talking about is that there is an organised group that goes around to cause trouble. And I think that Keir Starmer is right to call it out. It's fomented on social media. We know it's fomented by foreign actors. And it is very important that we get a lid on it. Nobody's going to... And you also cannot say, in my view, right, two wrongs make a right. So we know that, for example, there was some... the police were found, to a certain extent, wanting in the Leeds riots, but they took an operational decision. They lost control of that riot, frankly, but it wasn't... They weren't condoning it. There wasn't a quiet...
Isn't the point that's made by those far-right organisations, that as far as they're concerned, and I must emphasise, it's not to support what they say, is that, look, we're doing this because we can show that riots work?
Well, I mean, every organisation that wants to kind of undermine the rule of law and order will say that riots work. They don't work. And I hope that these riots don't work as well, and I hope the police do get a lid on it. You look, this terrible, terrible stabbing in Southport, the murder of 3 children, you know, it's absolutely appalling. But what happened was immediately social media blamed the wrong person, blamed, as it were, a cliché that it was an asylum seeker who had done it. We now know it was somebody who was born in Britain. He may have been not originally of British heritage, but he was born in Britain. And there's absolutely nothing to do with any kind of, immigration policy or asylum policy at all.
That's quite clear. Nels, you've heard what Lord Vaizey had to say, that Keir Starmer was right. But his response to set up a national organisation to tackle this, of police working with each other, that should be happening already. What do you think about his response?
I think his response was responsible. I think his response was sensible, and it's also practical, that he had to come up with a clear solution. It must be very clear who Keir Starmer is also, that I think the people who are thinking of going on all these riots, so you probably need to look up the term Director of Public Prosecutions 2011 during the riots then. Right. People got unprecedentedly long sentences, so he's very accustomed to throwing the book at people who bring the sort of public disorder to fore. I am very concerned about everything that's happening right now, because it looks like, again, that we are potentially going into a very serious summer. And what we're calling riots is often, sadly, it's almost like the advent or the re-advent of what looks like race riots in Britain. There was a person who seemed like he was just coming from work in Hartlepool, and it was an Asian gentleman, completely innocent, did nothing whatsoever, just going home, and he got punched in the face. There was kicking into people's homes. There was kicking in of a door. There's been all sorts of things. So I feel, and where I disagree with you, Ed, is that I do get what you mean. I feel this has become a little bit of an opioid for us, insofar as we blame foreign actors, or, say, Russia or so, for instance. I think that we have to really take a look at the issues that are impacting us in Britain, that we have to be clear that we have a far-right problem, a racism problem in Britain that is clear, present and absolutely dangerous, and is rapidly turning bloody.
So actually, on a long-term basis, Ed, what about that point, that we've got these simmering tensions that actually are not being dealt with, and that's why the slightest spark can set things like
well, there are 2 points here. One is that who are the people who are trying to undermine British society, frankly? And we focused in the past, for example, on Islamic extremism, but we haven't focused on far-right extremism, and we need to focus on that as well. But at the same time, with every kind of conspiracy theory, there is always a kernel of truth, and there's no doubt at all that people in this country are concerned about levels of immigration, concerned whether the government has control of it. I'm not, by the way, by any stretch of the imagination, linking the two events in the slightest, but that gives somebody their sort of on-ramp. So obviously the government is going to focus on making sure that it tackles things like the small boats crisis, just as the last government tried to do, and it will do things like ensuring that immigration is properly managed. Those are perfectly legitimate issues to debate.
What kernel of truth could, let's say, inspire people to go out into the street?
Nothing can inspire that. What I'm addressing Charlotte's point. Sorry. There is far-right extremism that needs to be tackled, but at the same time, some of the social issues that concern normal people who would never dream in a million years of rioting or causing disruption still need to be addressed.
But the trouble is, all this is going to take time, isn't it? And the things that Sir Keir Starmer is talking about are going to take time. And when we need to take action to stop this now, what needs to be
That's right.
done?
People watching this stuff at home will be saying that there will still be an element where they will say, well, you're just blaming the rioters, you're not dealing with some of the problems that Britain faces. And Keir Starmer has to do both, but he has to tackle the far-right extremism.
Should they be banned?
Well, I mean, I think there was a call to ban the EDL, which is already banned, as I...
Well, disbanded in 2015.
But yes, there shouldn't be any far-right organisation that foments terror that should be allowed to operate. But I don't know enough of the details of different organisations and what they're up to. But I know that they're being monitored by the police.
Immigration has been a blessing unto Britain. It has really done it's made Britain a much richer society. It's made Britain a much more brilliant society. It's made us much more competitive in many different areas. It boosts our economy. It makes, if you walk around places like London, many different places, the more diverse the area, so the more lucky you are to potentially live there. And I think but linking immigration to criminality is absolutely atrocious, because there's criminals in every single population you might go into. What we have here now, what the far right is taking advantage of, is when we see a criminal failing within one particular, say, immigrant population, which this young man was born and raised in Britain, they take advantage of that and pathologize that onto entire populations, sometimes on populations that have nothing to do with it whatsoever, such as the Muslim population in this situation. So I think one of the key things we have to become clear about in Britain today, if we want to address this issue, is stop running away from the idea that or run towards the idea that immigration has actually benefited us, as opposed to be viewed as some sort of disadvantage or something that is bad for our society.
I think that's a very fair point as well. Obviously, people do want controlled immigration policy, but also it is time for our political leaders to celebrate the contribution that immigrants have made to our country, frankly, for hundreds of years.
So actually, that needs to come from the top. I mean, the sad thing is, throughout all of this, though, that it all started from what happened in this attack and the death of these three beautiful girls, 6-year-old Bibi, 7-year-old Elsie and 9-year-old Alice. And, you know, how horrible is it now, in a sense, that we're then caught up by talking about these violent clashes as a consequence, instead of looking at those three girls and thinking about their loss and the lives that they could have had. And I just feel sad that it's moved on, in a sense, hasn't it? Because of that. Yeah,
it's very sad. We should be razor-sharp focused on Southport as a community of people, on the families of these three of the three young babies who were killed in this process. So, and making sure they receive justice, and making sure, once again, where there's a problem, there has to be a solution. Where there's a solution, there has to be a control to make sure it doesn't relapse. That should be our focus right now in healing our society and our community as a nation. We're not focused on that. We now have to focus on far-right thugs in the street,
and presumably the upsurge in knife crime. We've got Lord Hanson on, who's a Home Office minister in due course. We've got a backlog in courts. It takes sometimes 2 years to get violent crime from the moment of charge before a guilty verdict. There's no room in prisons. People are now being released, thousands of them, and there's no legal power to stop disinformation online that leads to this type of thing. So, I mean, the reality is it's chaos.
Well, I wouldn't say it is chaos, but knife crime is clearly a problem. It's clearly a problem in our big cities. It's clearly a problem in places like London and other big cities around the UK. I mean, I think that Britain has got a very good track record on cracking down on violent crime. I was thinking when we were talking about Southport, that this is a community that needs time to grieve, not to have its grief hijacked by the far right. But remember Dunblane and Hungerford, and after Dunblane, some very draconian and quite right laws on handguns came into being, and I think the number of deaths by handguns are very few and far between in the UK. But clearly knife crime is a massive problem, and clearly the police and the authorities, the mayors of these cities, need to work together to make sure there is zero tolerance for people carrying knives or using knives.
I mean, Nels, you talked earlier about Sir Keir Starmer saying, well, actually, he's going to throw the book at them. But as Rob is saying, you know, is he able to throw the book at them when we've got this massive backlog in the courts and we haven't got space to put them in prison anyway?
So I'm not a lawyer. I have not spent a single day in doing legal training. I've not even done a GCSE whatsoever or anything else. But I found myself spending a lot of time in court recently, largely because young people keep contacting me on Twitter because they've pretty much been caught up in some form of malicious communications act charge, and the CPS it's lost all concept of context whatsoever in these sorts of things, and so they're calling me and asking me to help them out. So I'm having to introduce them to lawyers and barristers, and I think that the CPS focused on the core job, focused on serious crimes, not one young person, say, using slang to another person or so, and you, older person, think it sounds offensive, and then you put them in court. Focus on serious stuff, clear the backlog as a result of that, get away from policing silly talk on Twitter, where there's serious issues on Twitter, serious malicious communication, focus on that. But let's focus on serious issues, and then we'll be able to get to a serious violent reduction or so, dealing with violent crimes in courts a lot faster, I believe.
It's interesting, isn't it? You know, we're looking at sort of the social media companies, their responsibility and all this, the misinformation that's been put out and how this has stoked this up. So Keir Starmer's talked about taking action on that, but actually, does more need to be done? You know, do they need to have more accountability?
Well, they do have now accountability, thanks to the last government. The last government passed the Online Safety Act. Ofcom, the media regulator, now has hundreds of people working on this. It cannot happen overnight. You can't pass a law on Monday and expect to see its impact on a Tuesday. Ofcom is consulting on how this law is going to work, but make no mistake, Ofcom now has the power, which it didn't have a year ago, to levy huge fines on the platforms if they don't do enough about disinformation.
I mean, before all this happened, I mean, there was policing on Twitter, now known as X, right? Elon Musk changed all of that. So, you know, people who were otherwise previously banned, you know, you name them, people who are espousing this stuff, which ends up in violence, as we've seen, simply didn't have a platform. Do you think that's right?
No, I think it's wrong, and I think Elon Musk is a very odd man. It's a very unfortunate thing that one of the richest, most influential and most powerful people in the world seems to have very odd outlook on life and seems to almost revel in being a sort of lord of discord. So Twitter itself, X, needs to police this stuff. But if it doesn't, Ofcom and indeed the regulator in Brussels do now have the power to find them.
But it's not just X. We now have broadcast platforms or so which regularly fall afoul of Ofcom, and Ofcom doesn't do anything to rein them in. Some of these broadcasters, I'm not going to say... Actually, I will. No, I won't say the names, just because it's a rival broadcaster. Right. But what we're finding is that Ofcom isn't taking the requisite action they should be taking to clamp down on these broadcasters, which are actively almost enabling some of the hate and conspiratorial nature that we're seeing within society that we are often ascribing to social media, but we actually have a television platform that's broadcasting it 24/7 and actually has MPs as presenters.
Right, here, you know, in on these, we've got Dr. Amir joining us this morning to discuss the GP industrial action. Dr. Amir, thank you for being here.
Good morning.
You know, good morning, lovely to see you. I spoke to sort of mum and family, and you know, a lot of people out here are confused about what GPs are asking for and what this industrial action is. Yeah. You know, they look at what GPs make each year. They understand that they have a very difficult job, but between 70,000 and 105,000 a year is what GPs make. And lots of people out there struggling, cost of living crisis, say, well, why isn't that enough?
Yeah, we're not asking for a pay rise. This is something completely different. It's not about our pay. So we're not striking, we're taking collective action. So what that means is working to rule. It means working to the contracts that we have with the NHS. And the reason we're doing this is because we've been asking for years and years to improve funding into primary care so we can offer more appointments to patients, so patients can get seen in a timely manner, and we, more importantly, can spend time with the patients who need that time. Currently, we're seeing patients every 10 minutes, and it's really complex stuff we're dealing with. And I often do go home and think about the patients I've seen and worry about whether I've given them the best of the care that I could have possibly done because of those time constraints. So what we're asking for is, at the moment, we get 6% of the NHS budget into primary care. We see 90% of the patients across the NHS. We want a 15% slice of that NHS budget. We don't want it immediately. We want 1% increase over time.
Help me with, and out people out there, with what that goes to in a surgery that helps you.
So it goes to employing more doctors, more nurses, so we can spend that on staff. It goes on our premises, paying for bills, upkeep of the premises, paying admin staff, reception staff. All of that comes out of that budget, but it also goes into providing more services to patients. So things like that are not necessarily in our contracts, things like, for example, ear syringing if you've got too much wax. Rather than refer you to the hospital, we will do it at the surgery. But that's not necessarily in our contract, but we will offer it to prevent patients going. The key message here is we want the same thing that patients want. We want timely access to GPs and GPs who can spend time with their patients. And I know there's a lot of focus on we're capping the number of patients we see each day to 25. That, to be fair, has been something that we've been arguing is actually a safe number of patients to be seen each day. And we've been doing that for years. You know, we've been saying that's a safe number so we can spend that quality time. At the moment, on average, I might see 40 patients a day. If I'm on call, that can go up to 70 or 80 patients a day. And that just isn't safe.
But the worry is, isn't it, that there are a number of people who find it really hard to get a doctor's appointment at the moment as it is. This is undoubtedly going to impact on patients. And the fear is that that could lead to, you know, problems with patients, illness. You know, you just don't know what's going to happen, do you? If someone can't get a doctor's appointment, and this is going to make the situation worse. Our debate later is whether GPs should be stopped from taking industrial action. The police aren't allowed to, the military aren't allowed to.
Well, it's not a strike, it's not industrial action, it's collective action. So there is a subtle difference there. And we agree, you know, patients are finding it hard to have an appointment. We get that, and this is why we're doing it. We want to employ more people, but the only way we can do that and offer more appointments, so in the long run, patients have easier access to their GPs, which is what they want, it's what we want. It's if the funding is there to employ those. But in the short term,
it's turning more people away, isn't it? It's saying we haven't got time.
We will prioritise the most urgent cases, the sickest patients. We won't turn anyone away. We will direct them to the most appropriate service for their needs. So nobody will be told, no appointments today, ring back tomorrow. We'll say, right, this is your problem. This might be the better place.
I mean, that's going to put pressure on 111. Right, which is already hard to get through to, right, and not exactly helpful. You're talking, I mean, there are 10 actions being suggested by the BMA. One of them is to switch off GP software that allows coding into the GP clinical record by third-party providers. I mean, there'll be people out there who may even support your cause and think, yeah, I'd like my surgery to be better. I mean, it's about 23% who think they're getting a good service, but they also don't want their or their family's lives to be put at risk.
No, neither do we. Neither do we. This is about a long-term plan. If the previous government listened to us over the years when we were asking for this, it wouldn't have come to where we are now. So that's the issue. We've been asking and asking and asking. We haven't just suddenly decided to do this, but nobody's listening to us. And that we know, everybody around this room now knows that general practice is broken. It's not working, and we want to fix it. And the only way to fix it is more people, more funding, more appointments. And this is the only way we feel now that anyone will listen to us.
OK, well, let's get reaction from both of you in that case. Nels, what do you make of this action, how it will impact on patients?
Well, the only fear, I think it's a robust action. I think it's fair action that you're taking. My only fear is that the concept of actually seeing 25 patients a day, I understand the need for it totally. Seems like a very low number. I mean, but to me, I normally see my GP for about 5, maximum 10 minutes. But I completely get it. I'm just wondering about the volumes of people that would be trying to get through, how long it would take them to see a doctor.
You've got to think about the complexity of the patients that GPs see. A lot of the things that might take 5 or 10 minutes may go to a different type of clinician, like a pharmacist. But the more complex stuff that I certainly see, and a lot of GPs across the country, are older people with multiple health problems, social problems, and trying to manage that in 10 minutes. For example, I may see, and I'll give you a real-life example, a lady with a complex neurological problem which has got worse. She also needs help with care at home, and she's struggling with her mood and depression. All of that within 10 minutes is impossible. And that is what... So you're using yourself as an example. I don't know what your health needs are, but you're young, you look fit and healthy to me. That won't take long.
That's an endorsement. There you are.
You just had your GP appointment.
There you go.
It took 30 seconds. It took 30 seconds. What's the problem?
Ed,
but that isn't
first of all, I'm very, very
see.
excited to see Dr. Amir in the flesh. I've only seen him on a Zoom.
We're delighted to have
this is
him
a
here in the
big TV moment for me that I'll remember for the rest of my life. I'm like a stuck record on the NHS because I think it needs such fundamental reform, and I would push reform down to the professionals. You know, I would allow pharmacists to do much more. There's so many producer interests in the NHS. The minute you say pharmacists should do more, look after my blood pressure or my cholesterol, the GPs jump up and down saying you're taking a service away from us. I should be able to walk to my local pharmacist. I've now got a great relationship with them because obviously I'm on so much medication that I can normally get stuff done.
I'm really sorry, just to interrupt.
And then no, you can't interrupt.
Oh, sorry. I'm in the studio. I want to interrupt.
But actually, would you welcome?
No, we welcome pharmacists. We don't jump up and down. We work alongside pharmacists really well. I train pharmacists, you know, and we want them to do that kind of thing. That's what they're excellent at.
And I'm also old enough to remember GP fund holding, which I thought was a great revolutionary scheme under the last Conservative government but one, where you gave GPs a budget and they could do innovations. They could do minor surgery, for example. They could start to offer particular services that made them stand out. It became much more, and people will hate me for saying it, much more of a consumer-orientated service, which I think is the big problem with the NHS.
Do you think that collective action like this is justified in order to be able to bring about change?
Well, I just think it's so 1970s. I think it's just so limited in terms of where are the radical and interesting ideas to make a GP service, a pharmacy service and a hospital service that is fit for the 21st century when we all live on our screens, we're all used to ordering stuff from retailers and so on. That we can get very quickly. Why can't we have that kind of consumer?
But that is happening.
I think it's still a very top-down, bureaucratic, inflexible service.
I think it's important that we listen to people who are doing the job.
Yes.
You want me to listen to experts?
Yes, that's exactly what I want.
That's outrageous.
We're doing that. We're offering online appointments. We're offering video consultations. We're doing remote consultations already. You know, we're doing a lot of that. The minor surgery you mentioned, I was doing the minor surgery clinic earlier this week. You know, we're doing a lot of these innovative stuff that you already do, or already say about. But what we want, what patients want, is to be seen by their GPs for their problems and for their medical issues to be bottomed properly.
I would just say, in answer to Nels's point, that, you know, weirdly, MPs have surgeries because holding an MP surgery is a bit like holding a GP surgery. So I totally understand, funnily enough, the 25 limit. You know, when I would hold a surgery on a Friday evening and 20 people would turn up, that's pretty exhausting, and you're rattling through the cases to get through as many people as you can.
I'm sure that it's not quite on point.
I'm not saying
because people, it's not life or death, right?
Let's just listen to
what Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, said. I totally understand why GPs would want to punish the previous Conservative government, but this action, if it goes ahead, will only punish patients. I mean, some of the action that's being suggested here is GPs refusing to share health data, necessary health data, with specialists. I mean, how is that not punishing patients?
It's not punishing patients. We're not in this to punish patients. We're here to serve our patients and to ensure they get the care that they need. I understand this list of 10 things that we're suggesting. All practices don't have to take all 10. They can choose 1, 2, 3 of them. They don't have to do all of them. But the key message here is we want a long-term, stable primary care system which is fit for purpose, which it isn't now. And I think saying we're punishing patients is really unfair. We're on the same side as patients.
Do you think you should give Wes Streeting at least the benefit of the doubt? He's a new health secretary. He's been in for 3 or 4 weeks. At least sit down with him and present.
From what I understand, there's already been a meeting with Wes Streeting, and it's been very productive.
Rather than slap a strike on the table in front of him and say, "Look at that."
No,
collective action.
It's not a strike. It's not a strike. And there has been a productive meeting with Wes Streeting already, but we need action, not words.
Dr. Mir, are you, just in light of everything, the change that's been made, a couple of things I just want to point out. Number one, do you have any fear about the rise of self-medication? Because people go into the internet, and sometimes the internet catastrophizes everything you go to. You Google any ailments, and so you're always going to one of the really, really horrendous side of things. I wanted to, and I'll ask you a following question too after that.
Yeah, there is some concern.
Are you taking over the show?
No, I was going to say, no, don't mind us. We do have other matters to get to, you know.
I've got other questions to ask Dr. Ramir, actually.
OK,
yeah,
I'll go with you.
I mean, feel free to answer Nell's question.
I mean, yes, there is some concern around that, and a lot of times when patients come and see me, they've been online and they're worried about what their symptoms might be, and it's my job to either reassure them or to investigate them. But yes, there is an element of that.
Sorry to bring that part of the discussion to a close, but we did just want to touch on the Olympics, because also, you know, there's been this controversy, the gender row. An Algerian boxer, Imani Khalif, was allowed to compete in this women's clash against Angela Carini, and this was finished after 46 seconds. There's been this eligibility row because of the fact that she was previously failed a gender eligibility test at the World Championships, but was allowed to compete at the Olympics. And you know, just to be clear on what we're talking about here, you know, she it's not like she was born a man, it's not a transgender issue, but it's just an eligibility criteria. She's got elevated levels of testosterone, which has previously ruled her out. What do we make of the fact that, you know, this has now caused a huge controversy, hasn't it, about fairness, about safety?
I fear. Again, I'm no expert in this whatsoever. I'm no expert in this, but I do fear, or I fear that in other places in the world, normally with this sort of built-in advantage or other sports or so, we'll normally call these people a super person, a superwoman, for example. If you're a woman who has that sort of elevated degree of power, be it from testosterone or anything else, we'll say, OK, this person's a great athlete or so. Usain Bolt's height may have helped him out. Michael Phelps was meant to have a longer arm span, etc., so on and so forth. So I do fear that the concept in which for some women to compete, women, not like they're just completely women, there's nothing whatsoever happening there, as you pointed out, that they have to actually take some sort of suppressant or testosterone or something. I really do fear about... it doesn't make me comfortable in the slightest bit. She's a woman, essentially. It's not... It's her... That's how her biology...
But the broader conversation that's been picked up, right, and again, I mean, just to be clear, it seems... talk about the internet like it's fake news, that this is a trans person, much like Leah Thomas in America. Just to be clear, Ed, if this was a trans person fighting as a woman, would you deplore that?
Yes, I would, because I think once you go through male puberty, your body is different to a woman's, even if you then transition to becoming a woman. And in a contact sport like boxing, that is very dangerous. And I think in other athletic sports like running and so on, it is very unfair. So I would condemn it,
Dr. Mir, you're here. Could you just help us out here, right? Because, again, you look on social media, as we all did, and frankly, you look at the fight, and inevitably, you sympathise with that Italian boxer and the things that she said. I mean, she makes clear that as far as she was concerned, she was fighting a man. And this Algerian boxer has failed a gender test. Why would that happen medically?
I'm not quite sure what a gender test is, if I'm being honest with you. It's not my area of expertise. But there are medical conditions that give women, biologically women, higher than average levels of testosterone. And they're common ones as well. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is one of them. There'll be lots of women watching this. 1 in 10 women may have that. It's where their ovaries are resistant to certain hormones and they don't ovulate each month. And that can lead to high levels of testosterone. Even simple things as insulin insensitivity, adrenal problems, thyroid problems, all of those can lead to higher than average levels of testosterone.
Following up medically, because the big question, right, that everyone's asking is, you know, a man has an XY chromosome and women have 2 X's. Could a born woman have XY chromosomes?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. It's very rare that a woman can be born with an extra chromosome. It's far more common for men to have an XXY gender, something called Klinefelter syndrome. But I don't know the details of this, and I find it really difficult to comment on someone's medical history without knowing those details.
But you know what I think the worst thing is in all of this, isn't there, is because of the sort of the differences between the two bodies and the way that they regulate this. There's so much speculation, and this is someone's, you know, privacy at the end of the day as well that everybody's talking about.
It's really important that medical information stays private and we only discuss things in general terms.
Although, I mean, she was, you know, banned previously.
Well,
and that's something
so
we'll
that's
be discussing
why the questions are around. I'm sure we will do. Thank you, Dr. Amir. Thank you, Nels. Thank you to you, Ed, as well.